Hi, it's John from Crafts by John UK. Today's card is this adorable young lady with butterfly wings and a motivational message, be the change, her wings unfolded. This is a cute little stamp set that I bought from China, from Temu I think it was, and I think it might be an all and create set, but I'm not absolutely sure. But it's got motivational messages on it and a really cute image. What I've done is I've just stamped the stamp set, which is here, and then I've used this basic stencil, which I also got from China, and some Arteza Watercolour Pens to colour this in. I've used glossy accents on the eyes, so you can see she's got a real sparkle on the eyes, and just a little bit of light stenciling around the edge with some distress inks in, I think, picked raspberry and wild honey. And then I've backed it in red, and unusually this time I've actually put it on a brown card base, just for a change. So if you want to see how I did this, stay tuned. So I've sped this up because it does take a little while, but you get the drill. So I've got my stamp set first of all. I had a good look at it. I've got wings and I've got a body, so I do need to do some masking. So I'll show you a very quick trick with some masking. So I used my stamping platform, and first thing I had to do was position stuff. Now, I'm not going to put her in any kind of background. I'm not going to create any lines or anything. I'm going to have the two images floating. So I had a look and kind of worked out what I wanted to do in terms of layout. So I thought her on the right with 1 centimetre above, 1 centimetre below, the shorter one above, the longer one below. So positioned that in my stamping platform. Just had a look using the grid on the stamping platform clear panel just to make sure things were lined up. Now, as this was new, I spritzed it with water and wiped it with my cloth. That's a little trick as well. Any new stamps, always do that because they have quite a lot of dust or grease on them, maybe from the production process. Always a good idea to give them a clean first. I used a little anti-static pad on my card as well, just in case it had any grease or fingerprints on it, and then basically stamped it down. I used my hand on this one, not my little tool, but it stamped fine. It was a good impression, so it's fine. I then grabbed my Wow Ultra Fine Clear Emboss, which I always use, and give it a good dip in there before I then heat embossed it using my heat tool. This sets the ink, makes it nice and glossy black, and also then just gives you a nice edge to colour up to. So I gave it a heat, and you can see as I do that it goes nice and black and glossy. Nice. This is a really nice stamp set actually. It's quite a cute image, and I can think of a few different things to do with her. And as I said, there's some masking here. So what you'll see is I dry this, well I heat it, sorry, just to get the embossing powder working, and then I grab a scrap piece of paper. So you can see where I'm going with this. So I lay this piece of paper down on my image, make sure that she is in the frame, and then basically I just stamp another version of her. All I want is a mask of her, so I can cut that out, lay that on top, and then stamp the wings over the top of it, basically. So I give this all a good clean, good to clean as you go along. And I did actually make the mistake of putting the whole stamp set away, back in its envelope and everything, forgetting that I needed the wings, like a complete idiot. Anyway, spent all this time opening the bag, which is a waste of time, which is why I'm speeding these videos up. I don't know anybody wants to sit there and watch 35 minutes of me doing this, so if I double speed it, it only cuts it down to an 18-minute video, which is much better. So I did just dry her off, that little scrap piece. I didn't bother to heat emboss it. And then taking my little Tim Holtz scissors, I fussy cut her out. Now I only need to cut the side of her body and kind of the start of her head, because that's the place where I'm going to put the wings. I don't need to bother about cutting her hair or anything else, which is good because I'm not a hairdresser. So I cut both sides out, and basically I'm just going to lay her down on top of the stamped image and then position the wings, stamp those, and of course this mask will protect the image I've already stamped and it won't get stamped over. And that's how masking works. So you can see I'm just lining her up, making sure I'm getting her in the right place. I've grabbed some low tack masking tape, which is best to use, just to get her in the right position and keep her in the right position. It's better, if anything, to cut slightly in, just to make sure that you don't end up with any white lines between stamped image and then the bit that you stamp with the mask in place. So if in doubt, cut inside a little bit, because you've always got a black border to play with. There I am opening the packet again, taking the wings out, which I shouldn't really have put away. So I positioned them kind of how I fancied them really. I wasn't sure how far behind her to go with them, but I wanted a fair bit showing, so I thought, yeah, I need to do that. Again, gave them a little spritz because they're clean, because they're new basically, to give them a clean. I haven't used them before. Just double check that I was right with my logic, because sometimes I'm not always right, but hopefully this way around I would be. There we go. So there's our image, and then when I take the mask off, you can see the wings are now sitting behind. So you always stamp foreground image first, background image second, and each layer kind of goes further back, further back. I don't really like masking. I must admit, it's not my thing. It takes me a moment to work out which order I need to stamp things in, but it is effective and it does look nice, so it was worth the effort. But you can see just stamping on a scrap bit of paper and cutting that out literally takes a minute, so that was relatively straightforward. Right, I'm popping them back on their packet. Sorry for the cough, but I've definitely got a bit of a cough at the moment, hence clearing my throat a lot, and I have absolutely no water or anything with me, which is really clever. So next, Arteza Watercolour Brush Pens. These are my favourites. You know I use these all the time if you watch my videos. So first of all, I go through the set and pick out a few colours. There are 48 in this set, 4 trays of 12, and I absolutely love them. I've been using them now, I think, probably 3 or 4 years, and they're still going strong. A few of them are getting a little bit gnarly, but you can usually create what you need. I've zoomed in a little bit there while I'm doing the colouring, just to make it easy for you. So I always start by laying down the colour around the edge, and then I'll use the water brush to pull that colour into the middle. That way we end up with a kind of a two-tone effect, and it gives it a little bit of depth, a little bit of 3D, and it's not just a big blob of one colour. I'll also blot that in the middle just to take a little bit off there, before I then go around back again just to darken the edge, and then just blend that in. There we go, and that's our panel coloured. So you can see darker in the edge and lighter in the middle. So I decided to give her a yellow dress. I thought that was quite cheerful and bright, and then I go in with a kind of an sort of, I don't know what colour that is really. It's a light brown, a kind of an orangey brown, just to give her hair a bit of colour. And then once I've actually, if you see, I'm using the actual pen on directly onto the cardstock, which is something I don't normally do. But what I did then is, once I'd laid one down, I then went round and did like some of the individual curls in slightly different colour, so that it gives it a little bit of depth. I've put some kind of lilac-y on the acrylic block there, and then you can see I'm just using that as a kind of block base colour for the wings. So I've put the lilac down on the whole wing because I know I'm going to use darker colours or different colours on the individual little parts of it. So you can see I'm laying that down, being a little bit careful, but not being, too crazy. So I'm just getting a layer of colour down, so that will be our kind of base colour for the wings, cleaning my brush, and then I'm going to go in with different colours that I picked. So I've got some pink, I've got like a soft pink and a bright pink. So I'm going to go in now, actually I'm going onto the face now, so I used that colour first on the face and built the layers up here, because I didn't really decide when I started what colour I wanted her to be, but I thought the face I was going to do fairly neutral. She's basically a flat pink. I didn't put too much depth on the face because I thought I want all the attention to be on the wording and the wings. And then I did the eyes. So I blobbed around the centre of the eye, and then I kind of pulled the ink out so that it had a darker panel in the middle. But I was going to use glossy accents on this, which tends to flatten stuff out anyway, so I didn't pay too much attention to the eyes. I did go back in again and just darken the centres, but as I said, I left it kind of flat because I knew I was going to put the glossy accents on, which always dampen things down. There we go, the eyes are done. And then lips, I go over some nice pink lips to go with the parts of the wings that are pink. And I decided to just kind of colour in alternate bits on the wings really. The pattern was relatively common from one wing to the other, so I decided to just follow really and just do some stripes and some just different colours. So I ended up with 2 different colours of pink on that kind of pale lilac background with a little bit of purple as well. I just coloured different bits, different colours basically. I didn't think too much about it. So I had a kind of a dull pink, and then I had like a bright sort of fuchsia pink that really was quite bright, I'm not sure you can see that here too well, but it is a very, very bright colour. And then I just used some purple for some highlight and just went in and did all the circles in a kind of a brighter purple colour, just to give it a bit of pizzazz. You can see I also did the ends of those little patterns. I hope you can see this. It's not zoomed in too closely, but you can hopefully see what I'm doing. Just to colour in everything basically and make sure it all had some colour. Once I've done that, I used a little bit of the purple on her stockings and I coloured little bits in, and then just used my water brush to kind of drag that colour out to give that a background colour, which was a similar pink to her face actually. And then I did the bit round her eye, which looked to me like a flower, so I thought, yeah, same yellow as the dress. Tie those two things together. And then the only thing really left to colour was the kind of steeple. Oh, I did a little bit of white highlighting actually with my jelly pen. But it didn't show out too well, I think, because it was quite light in the eye anyway, but I thought, well, why not? And then I just decided to do a bit of a grey here. I thought I'm going to leave that relatively neutral, so I coloured one side in grey, and then I just used my water brush to pull that across, just to create a bit of depth really. I wasn't too sure what it was really. Why is she standing with a church? I'm not really too sure. Anyway, but I just left that. That's why I didn't actually try and ground it with any ground or any kind of background. But quite a nice, cute image, and quite a motivational message to send someone as well. So at this point I'd done my sort of foreground, just needed to decide what to do with the background. So I grabbed this stencil. It's quite a nice stencil I got from one of the Chinese sites. I don't know who actually makes it, but I just thought it was quite cool, and I like this sort of grid lines effect. I thought it was quite different. So I just used some residual ink on my smoothies, not adding any ink from any ink pad at all. And that's the thing, if you keep these in a tub, there's another tip for you, it keeps them juicy and they retain the ink that they were last used with. So I often do that. I'm quite frugal. I'm not going to keep using ink if I can make do with the ink that's left on a smoothie. So I used a bit of, I think usually wild honey is one of those colours. It's a kind of a mid-orange, and picked raspberry, which is one of my favourites. So I used a bit of both, and I just layered over and over before I then added colour directly from the smoothie as well. So I laid down the stencil, so I got a bit of variation in colour, and then went over just with the smoothie as well, just carefully kind of rotating it, a little bit of light pressure, just to see how much came on, and then adding more as I needed to. Remember, it's always easier to add than take away. So once I'd kind of used up the ink that was on there, I got a bit bolder, and you can see I'm running it up and down. I would never do that to start with, but once you've kind of used all the ink and exhausted what's left on there, you can do that fairly safely. And then I went in again with the wild honey, just darkened that a little bit. It just takes it makes it less sterile if you've just got an image in the middle with nothing around it, nothing behind it at all. And it also kind of brings your attention to the focal point as well. I went around the edges with the smoothie as well, just again using residual ink, just to darken those edges so that they weren't the white of the card blank or the piece of paper, just so that when they go on the card blank you don't get a horrible white edge. So I did a bit of the honey and a bit of the picked raspberry. At that point my mat was a mess, so I think I gave it probably a clean. You have to clean up as you go along, otherwise you're going to get something on your project you probably did not intend. There we go, gave that a wipe with my cloth. And then it's really just time to assemble everything. So at that point I think I decided I'm going to use red to back it. So I grabbed a piece of red which is sitting next to me in my trusty shelves, and I used either double-sided, there we go, I think it was double-sided, or glue to stick that layer down. There we go, super quick, especially at double speed. I wish I could do it that quickly in real life. And basically just all around the edges and a blob in the middle, and then I'll just lift all those up and stick that straight away down because that's relatively easy. You can see that's quite a nice red, and it goes quite well with this card. So just laid that down, and then I used my scalpel just to trim that off. Going by eye, didn't measure it. we go, and I just put a new blade in that scalpel actually. Oh, it's such a pleasure to cut with a new blade after using a fairly blunt one for quite a while. And then I needed to grab a card blank. Now this is where I had a problem because I couldn't actually find any 7x5 card blanks. Not in my normal drawer, not in my other drawer. So in the end I actually grabbed a brown card blank. I've got these kind of natural looking ones. I think I bought them in the range. And I just hadn't used them. They were sitting in the spare drawer. So I thought, well, I think the time has come to break out the brown. And I thought it's quite a nice light panel as well, so it would work on a brown background rather than white. I do tend to be quite traditional, and most of my card blanks are white, but in this scenario I just thought, yeah, why not? So it's a little bit rustic, so I used brown and basically just stuck the whole thing down. I thought red against brown with a predominantly kind of orangey pinky background panel, that would definitely work, and it did, so I was quite glad about that. So again, in with the double-sided. This time bunny ears so that I can get a bit of wiggle room. I'm just lifting up a little edge. That's another little tip for you. Anybody who watches my videos knows that I do this all the time. Thank you, Natasha Foot, who taught us all how to do that. And then that just gives you the wiggle room to just get that in the right place. Apologies, it's slightly off camera there, but that's the bit that's really tricky, getting that in the right place. Okay, so I've just used that bone folder just to press down the edges, because when you cut with a scalpel you do get a slightly lifted edge, so I decided to just go along with my bone folder and flatten those. This is the point where I decided to add a little bit more white in the irises, just so that I've definitely got a white edge, and then I went in with my glossy accents. But as usual, I don't know about you, but I find that product always clogs up, so I have to get the pin from my little tiny glue pot every time and clean that nozzle. I've tried storing it upside down, I've tried all sorts of things. Never and ever works without having to unblock it. So anyway, I put some glossy accents on there, and obviously that took a little beat to dry, but I will put some pictures of the finished card at the end, including a close-up of her eyes, so you can see the effect that the glossy accents have. So again, there I am unblocking my glossy accents, and then I just put that on, blob it on, and kind of pull it around. You'll see the eyes go hazy and a little bit opaque while the product is wet, but once it dries clear, and it does give quite a good realistic glossy effect. So you can see that if I hold that up. There we go, so there's our card done. Ended up being quite a nice card, and it ended up looking quite good. I quite like it, so it's a nice motivational card I shall send to somebody who just needs a little lift up. There you go. I hope you've enjoyed watching that. If you have, please give me a thumbs up and consider liking and subscribing to my channel, and then you'll get told about other videos when I post them. Thanks for watching today, and I'll catch you soon.